Hi, everybody. Welcome to your Money Map, sponsored by the Alliance for Lifetime Income. I'm your host, Jean Chatzky. Very glad to have you along with me today. And it's an exciting day. It's a day that has already made some news as expected. President Biden and his administration announced $10,000 in student loan forgiveness for families, single people who have income of up to $125,000 a year. Those people with Pell Grants will receive another $10,000 in student loan forgiveness. And the extension, as expected, on the student loan hiatus has come through. Payments will not begin again until December, all of which is a good topic to talk about today as we head into the back to school season. We're actually going to do that and so much more with Dana Anspach. And Dana is the founder and CEO of Sensible Money. In the year 2020, for the third year in a row, Investopedia named her to be one of their top 100 financial advisors, specifically for her contributions to the field of financial literacy. She is a contributor to MarketWatch, U.S. News and World Report, and she's the author of a couple of books. One is Control Your Retirement Destiny. The other is Social Security Sense. As always, we invite you to participate in this conversation. If you've got questions, if you've got comments, please join us. Pop them into the comment window, the chat window, and we'll be happy to answer them. And Dana, let me say hello and welcome you to your Money Map.
Hi, Jean. It is truly an honor to be here.
Thank you so much for joining me today. So let me just begin with the news. What do you make of student loan forgiveness, and what sort of an impact do you think it will have on the people that you work with?
Yeah, so I mean, who wouldn't love student loan forgiveness? I graduated with student loans, and I think it's amazing that they're doing that for young people. And I say young people, I'm sure there's people of all ages that still have student loans. So I also have heard the sentiment. Some people, feel like they missed out. How come people's loans are getting forgiven now, but that didn't happen to them? But, truly, I think it's something to be grateful for. They will be able to deploy that cash, hopefully, in other productive areas. I do get a little concerned about people who may not be planning for those payments to begin again in December. I think, we can get used to having that extra money each month, and maybe we sign up and get a new car payment or move into a more expensive place, and suddenly those payments restart and you go, oh, I kind of forgot about that. You also asked about the impact on the type of clients we work with. Most of our clients are near retirement or already retired, and they don't have student loans in place. We don't see that within our own clientele, but they are certainly going to impact their children and in many cases their grandchildren.
Yeah, 100%. And I think that your point about getting ready now to begin student loan repayment in December is a really good one. We thought that the payment hiatus was going to end in August. It was scheduled until today with this announcement to actually end in August. And so I hope that people have been preparing to start that back up again. And specifically, I mean, it's the little things. If you moved, for example, while student loan payments were paused, it's a really good idea to just get in touch with your lender, let them know where you are, make sure that all of the tactical pieces are in place to pick it back up again.
Yeah, that's a fantastic suggestion.
Let's talk about your area of expertise, which is decumulation, right? We talk an awful lot, or at least we have through the years, about accumulating money for retirement, pulling together enough assets to know that you've got a nest egg that is sizable enough that when you throw in Social Security, you'll have enough to live on, if not lavishly, then at least comfortably for the rest of your days. you do something different. So what does it mean to be a decumulation expert?
Yeah, as you said, I started my career focusing on accumulation, which is what we all have to do. But I had this experience with a couple that reminded me of my grandparents. They came in, they had about 500,000 saved, but their money hadn't grown at all over 10 years. And they happened to bring me 10 years worth of statements so I could see exactly what was done. And things had been recommended to them over the years that didn't seem like it was in the client's best interest. And if they had been educated, if someone had taken the time to educate them, which sometimes you have to push back on what someone says they want and educate and say, well, here's, the way that you could likely accomplish that result. But if they had just followed a kind of a plain vanilla index fund asset allocation strategy, their money would have doubled over that same time frame. And so I remember getting mad. Like, these are like my grandparents. They have to live off this money the rest of their life. And you can't afford to make really big mistakes at that stage in life. And that's what really drove me to this decumulation phase, that point in time where you have to live off your acorns. We tend to accumulate things, a 401k plan here, an IRA, maybe an annuity. Maybe our employer offered benefits and we put some money in this stock or in this mutual fund. And suddenly one day, all of these things need to work together toward the common goal of creating reliable, lifelong cash flow. And that's what we call a decumulation specialty.
When you go through the process of figuring out decumulation for people, I would imagine that you go through a very specific process when you look at what they have and you look at what life will cost them, and then you sort of try to puzzle it together with Social Security fitting in somewhere along the way. Can you help us? Can you take us through those steps?
Yeah, absolutely. We actually break our planning into a series of strategy meetings, which, as you said, specific topics that we cover at each one of those. And we start with your standard of living expenses. So, one of the things I experienced early in my career was people would say, oh, I spend 60,000 a year. Well, we get into retirement and suddenly they were taking out more than that, needing more money. And I said, what's going on? So I realized we really had to dig a bit deeper on what people spend. And so we will start with someone's take home pay now and create an itemized timeline. So you could do it in an Excel spreadsheet by labeling, 2022, 2023, and then you're projecting out your mortgage and your utilities, all of your fixed expenses and entertainment and new cars and home repairs. So some of the things that we found were routinely missing were big ticket items that don't occur every year.
Uh-huh.
You have to buy a new car. You'll still need a new car sometime in retirement. You might need a new roof during your retirement. It's a pretty big ticket item. New flooring. A deck might need to be replaced. We would find that people would forget about dental expenses, crowns and bridges and things that tend to show up and can be very costly. And so we would go through someone's standard of living, and then if those expenses weren't accounted for, we have a process of adding them in. In addition, we account for inflation. Certain expenses won't inflate. If you have a fixed mortgage, that cost is going to stay flat throughout retirement, but the property taxes and insurance piece will grow. And even if your mortgage is paid off, you will still have property taxes and insurance, and that will continue to rise with inflation. And so we get very granular. We will apply a 5% inflation rate to healthcare related expenses and 3% to other more typical standard of living expenses. And that is phase one of our planning, is really what will you spend?
Before we go to phase two, can we just dig into inflation there for a second? Because,
Yeah.
we are in the middle of this inflationary period that we haven't seen in 40 years, right? With inflation running at 8.5%. A report came out just this week from the Brookings Institution that looked at just the cost of raising a child from birth to age 17 and put that number at $300,000 total. That's not including college, right? That's just to get them out of the house, through high school and out of the house. And I'm wondering if you think that people who are planning for retirement are underestimating, in many cases, the toll that inflation will take overall. I sat down with my financial advisor at one point and ran the numbers and was looking at the bite that inflation would take. And I think I was underestimating it when I was doing it on my own.
Yeah. It impacts demographic sectors differently. And so for somebody that might be used to living off of 40 or 50,000 a year, inflation is going to have a much bigger impact on them. Basic increases in energy and healthcare and food are going to take a bigger piece of their budget. For people that spend typically 100,000 a year or more, we've found that oftentimes inflation doesn't have as big of an impact on them. And David Blanchett, he used to be head of retirement research at Morningstar. He has since moved to a position with another company, but he has a great research paper on this called The True Cost of Retirement, where they show the impact of inflation on different sectors. And so we actually will apply different inflation rates depending on the demographic of the person that we're working with. But yes, I do think people can underestimate the impact. We do see that as people enter, it's what's called the slow go years. So retirement can be broken into these phases of go, early retirement. I'm going to travel. I'm going to do this. I'm going to do that. Slow go. And then what are called the no go years, where healthcare events tend to take precedence. During those slow go years, we actually find that in inflation adjusted terms, people's spending declines.
Uh-huh.
And they're not traveling as much. They're not eating out. They're not shopping. They're happy, and they're not doing it because they can't. They have the means to do it. It's just their values change. They're comfortable staying home. And so sometimes we will build what we call the Spend More Now plan, to say, okay, inflation may not happen evenly over your retirement. So what if we build in extra spending earlier when you're in those go-go years, knowing you will enter the slow go years and it will slow down a little bit. So there's different ways to account for it.
I like the idea of a spend more now plan. Could I just sign up for that and be on that for a while? That sounds pretty good to me. We've got some comments coming in from our audience. Jamal was pointing out that yes, new cars are actually a thing once you're in retirement. I know there are many people they get to the point where they're going to retire and they think, oh boy, I better pay off all my debt. I better buy my last new car. If retirement lasts 30 years, you are going to have those continual expenses.
You are. And I do see people rush to get everything done before retirement, and it's not done. You will have all new cars. Some people move. They never planned on it, but suddenly this time and space opens up to explore different areas, and they find themselves suddenly moving in retirement, something they never thought they could do. People don't realize you can still get a mortgage even though you're retired. I have had people thought, and they're just surprised. What? Oh, I thought I would never be able to get a mortgage again. So there are options, that your options don't change all of that much. Life
Just
goes on.
because
Yeah.
just because you're retired. Jason is pointing out, we were talking earlier in the show about President Biden's forgiveness of $10,000 of student loans. And he said the flip side to that is that as the government prints more money, this leads to more inflation. And that is a worry that I know many people have. He notes inflation is real and it hits the middle class the most. I think that's definitely a good point there. Jason, thank you so much for chiming in. If you have a question or you have a comment, please put it in the comments section. Dana and I would be happy to take your questions. So as we talk about your plan, your decumulation plan, you took us through phase one, getting a handle on what we're spending. And I think that those expenses that are intermittent, the ones that are not even quarterly or annually, are the ones that really come out of nowhere and get us. I had to replace 2 air conditioners recently, and those were like, oh, really? This is an every 15-year thing. I didn't quite budget for that, but I think having a fund for those sorts of expenses in general is a really, really good idea. What's phase two?
Phase two is where we start looking at the tweaks that could be made, specific decisions, such as when should you claim Social Security? Should you claim it at 62, 66, 70? I have people that still don't know that for every month you delay, you get a bump in your Social Security. I just talked to someone, I believe it was earlier this week, who thought, oh, I thought if I didn't take it at 66, I had to wait until 70. And they didn't realize that no, you could claim anytime along the way. And for every month you delay, it will recalculate and you will get a little bit more. So we
We
start to.
talked about, I'm going to actually pause you there because I know that we get a lot of questions on Social Security and there's a lot of confusion. And for many people, this is an annuity that they can count on in retirement and they want to maximize it. Do you have any advice that you find yourself giving on a regular basis for claiming Social Security?
We like people to think of their Social Security in terms of what would you have had to save to deliver that same stream of cash. And in many cases for a working couple, it's over $1 million. And if you had $1 million, you probably wouldn't make a cavalier decision on how to spend it. And so when we see people making the decision as to when to claim Social Security without doing any kind of an analysis, I would equate that to a cavalier decision. And so if you're thoughtful about it, and there are some free tools, AARP has a tool, there's something called Open Social Security that has a great calculator. So there are many tools you can use to do an analysis. And for couples, they really want to look at the decision as maximizing the cash flow over their joint lifetime. And we still find that people will say, I should take it as soon as possible. And if you can step back from the emotional impact, of course we want to take it, we've been paying into it, and be analytical and play the odds. If you're going to Vegas, you're going to play the odds, right? And so the odds are that you are likely to live longer and likely to actually get more money out of Social Security by delaying the age at which you start, unless of course you have some health conditions. If you have some legitimate reasons that your life expectancy may be shorter than average, that would change the decision. But that's the type of advice we find, the things we're educating people on a regular basis.
Hey, I think you've got such a good point there. When we think of a monthly Social Security check, it tends to be a relatively small-ish number. But if you can think of your lifetime stream of payments, it's a very large number. And that sort of large number demands that we pay a little bit more, if not a lot more, attention to it. All right. Phase 2 continued. So we're looking at when to take Social Security.
Yeah, and we're looking at taxes. So if I have a client I'm working with who has $1 million in a brokerage account, in mutual funds, let's say index funds and stocks and bonds, and I have someone that has $1 million in an IRA or 401k, they diligently put money into their employer plan. They are going to have very different situations in retirement. The person with all the money in the 401k and IRA, every dollar they withdraw will be taxable. And the way the formula works, that will actually make more of their Social Security subject to taxation. And so even though they have the same amount of money on an after-tax take-home basis, the person with the 401k and IRA will have substantially less to spend than the person with the brokerage account. And so including taxes in the analysis is important. I had an executive from a financial services company come in and go through our planning process, and I was like, why are you hiring us? Like, you know this stuff. He said, you're not going to believe this, but I did all my own planning and I forgot about taxes. He just had used a simplistic, the 4% rule many of us have heard about, which says you could spend approximately 4% of your portfolio value each year and reasonably expect to have that last for life in inflation adjusted terms. I think those rules are great for people in their 30s and 40s who are getting a general sense of how much would I need to save. But when it comes to the point where you're within 10 years of your actual retirement date or getting ready to take cash flow, I don't think those rules are good to use. If you delay Social Security, sometimes you can take out a lot more than 4% from your IRAs and 401ks in that 4-year time period while you're delaying, and then you take out less later because Social Security kicks in at a higher amount. So with some planning, there are ways to make your money last longer. And that's what strategy 2 focuses on for us, the phase 2 of our planning.
When we do this show, and I was interested to see you bring up David Blanchett and his research. He's been on this show a couple of times. He's also a fellow of the Alliance for Lifetime Income. We talk about things like not just making your money last for a long time, but making your money last for as long as you do, and that leads to a conversation about annuities often, because those vehicles will, by design, last as long as you do. Social Security, as I pointed out, is an annuity. It is a stream of income that will last for life. How do you think about annuities and other vehicles that can provide guaranteed lifetime income in your planning?
Yeah, we think of them as a tool. And I see this bias sometimes against tools. And I used the analogy before. It's as if I pulled out a hammer and someone said, "Oh my God, a hammer. No, I can't use a hammer." And so sometimes we see these biases that we go, wait a second, it's a financial tool, and an annuity is a form of insurance. There are many different types of annuities, so I think people get them confused. When we think of the best and highest use of an annuity, it is to provide lifetime income, and it does something that no other vehicle does. So the longer you live, the higher your internal rate of return becomes for that income stream.
Wait,
And
break that down again and explain that.
yeah, so if I were to track the rate of return on your investments, it is what it is, right? Over the time, the market goes up and the market goes down. Well, I can track the rate of return on an annuity. Here's what you put in, and here's what you would get out. And the longer you live, the higher that rate of return. So if you live 30 years, annuities, we've seen annuities that will deliver, a 5 to 6 or 7% internal rate of return, which is good in this environment. It's
Sure.
not a bad return. And so people get hung up on the fact that, if I put my money in this product, I get this cash flow stream, but what if I die? But what if you live? We want to plan for you to live a long, healthy, happy life. And the statistics show that is more likely. And so annuities have a really unique value proposition. It's technically something that's called mortality credits that you take advantage of, but that doesn't sound great. But if you think of it as the longer I live, the higher the rate of return that I get from this vehicle.
I've heard you say before that when you sit down with a client and it's that meeting where they are at the point of, here comes my retirement. I've been saving for years. Now I have to live off this money that I've saved. They're terrified. What do you think brings on that fear, and does having things like guaranteed income lessen the fear?
Yeah, I think they equate retirement as one of the big life stressors, up there with marriage and divorce and moving and a new job, having a child and retirement. It's right up there. Think about the people who have saved your whole life, you're building this nest egg, and one day you're going to have to live off of it. And even very sophisticated investors that we've worked with are terrified. And I've had to tell people, look, I am going to start sending you a direct deposit to show you that this money's not disappearing, that you can take an income stream off of it. And we do try to reassure people that it's normal to feel that fear. And it's that fear of, oh my gosh, I worked so hard to build this up. What if I see it going down too fast? I can't go back to work at this stage. They understand there's not a lot of forgiveness or chance for do-overs when you're at that phase. And I think that's where that fear comes from. And yes, we do see having more guaranteed income can help alleviate that. We use something we call a coverage ratio. So we look at the expenses that we've planned out, and we look at what portion of those expenses will be covered by guaranteed sources of cash flow. Social Security, pensions, an annuity payment. It might be an annuity they already have and they bought the type of annuity that was in the accumulation phase. And we are now explaining, here's how you would turn on the income feature of this annuity. And so when that coverage ratio is less than 50%, we will bring up the conversation of, how do you feel about that? Would you like more guaranteed cash flow? And particularly at that point in time where you're out into your 70s. So after you're both, or if you're married or single, either you're on full Social Security, what is your coverage ratio at that stage? And we look out at that point because we see cognitive decline with our clients, and we want to make sure that the more guaranteed income they have as they get out into their 70s, the more it can protect them from any bad financial decisions they may be prone to make in the future, from elder care fraud, from things that we hope never happens to us, but we do see it happen. And if you have guaranteed cash flow coming in, that money is safe and it's protected from many of those issues.
Yeah, I've seen this with my mother, actually. So my mom is in her 80s, and her nest egg, she's been retired for years now. I mean, well over a decade and a half, basically. And the value of her portfolio has actually stayed constant. But she's had a couple of sources of guaranteed income to draw on: Social Security, some pensions. And it has enabled her to travel, to spend a little bit more freely, and not to worry as much. Is there something magical about that 50% coverage ratio? The fact that I think what you're saying, and correct me if I'm wrong, you want to know that 50% of money is guaranteed, is coming from guaranteed sources?
Yeah, and there isn't anything magical. I wish there was. We picked what we thought was a good starting place for a discussion, and people's values come into the picture. So this drawing behind me that says your money, your values can sway that. We've had people who want 100% of what they call their base lifestyle expenses covered by guaranteed income. And we've had people who are usually higher net worth, where it's not really an applicable metric. They're never going to outlive their savings. And so there's other factors that we look at, but we think for a lot of people, 50% is a good starting place to say, how do you feel about that? Would you like to see that number higher? There's what I call the mathematical side of most decisions, and then there's the values side of the decision. And we will often frame things in terms of red, yellow, or green. So red, you really don't want to make this decision. Green, you really should make this decision. But many of them fall in the yellow. And then we will say, look, it's not going to have a big impact on your level of wealth or cash flow either way. So what feels better to you? What is going to allow you to sleep better at night? And so those are the conversations where some people, I had a very high net worth person put $2 million into immediate annuity products once, because that is what made them feel comfortable, that they could weather anything that might come along during their retirement. I have other people who would never do that.
We've got some questions coming in from Pamela. I want to make sure we have a minute or two to get to them. She notes that she has some stocks in an IRA, and she's wondering if she can transfer those stocks to a Roth IRA, or does she have to have the money in cash?
It's a great question. So usually it's what we call a conversion. So when you're converting IRA assets to Roth IRA assets, most custodians do allow you to do an in-kind conversion. So you're specifying the number of shares of each security that you want to have converted to that Roth IRA. So yes, you should be able to do that.
And now with the markets off their highs of the last couple of years, is this a time when you are talking to more people about Roth conversions, that you're finding that this is an opportune time?
We are always talking to people about Roth conversions. I am a big fan of tax-free money, and we do it in a way where we're looking at their tax rate now and their tax rate in the future. But yes, in general, when the market officially hit bear market territory earlier this year, we had a list of people that we knew were likely to do Roth conversions. It made sense based on their plan. And we reached out to them during that dip and said, we think now is the time to do it. And so if you can take advantage of converting during a downtime in the market, absolutely.
I want to come back with where you began. I know that you were drawn to this field for very personal reasons, Dana. And I just wanted to ask you to talk a little bit about your own story and how this led you to your philosophy of planning around your values. I think values-based planning is not something that we talk about often enough.
Yeah. So my parents were divorced when I was 3, and I primarily grew up with my mom and went to visit my dad in Iowa in the summers and Christmas. And my mom filed bankruptcy twice growing up, and my dad was very methodological,
Methodical?
methodical. Thank you.
Sure.
And diligent saver, and our clothes had to come from Sears, and I didn't like that when I was a teenager, but as I grew up, I could see the difference. And I actually, in high school, won a scholarship for writing an essay called Good Credit, Key to Your Financial Future. And I didn't really put it together till about a decade ago. I found it in a scrapbook of mine, and I was like, wow, I wrote this in high school. How did I end up in this profession? Uh, my degree was in advertising with a minor in business, but when I got out of school, my dad had said, "Look, the first thing you need to do is hire a financial planner." And
Wow.
so, yeah, it was. I have to credit my dad with a lot of what drew me to this. So I was selling advertising at the time and came across 2 people, and one, I was married at the time, told me and my husband to put all of our money in 2 whole life insurance policies, all our extra money. And the other planner, Les Zetmeyer, I reference him in my book. He said, look, you need an emergency fund, and here's what this 401k is that your employer is offering, and here's how it works. And here's why you might want term insurance at your age. You don't have any children. And so I could clearly see that one person was offering us financial planning and education, and the other person was trying to sell us a product. And so I went on and used to ask Les so many questions that one day he said, have you ever considered this as a career? And that was in 1995, and that's how it took off.
When you decided that you would focus on decumulation, but also on values-based planning, what does that mean to you? I mean, when you hear about people who are lining up their money with their values, what steps are they taking in order to do that?
I think seeing the numbers frees people up to take a look at their values. So when we're driven by fear, oh my gosh, I don't know if I have enough. What if I'll run out of money? Can I retire? We've had people cry in meetings when we tell them they do have enough. And we've had even wealthy people be surprised that they can retire. So when the I'll never be able to retire, I can't afford it, it's not possible is off the table, it allows people to focus on what's important. We've had conversations with people around, spending less so that they could exit a career they were unhappy with 5 years earlier. They can be a choice in making that decision once it's quantified into, what does that mean? Does that mean spending 10,000 a year less? Well, that's less than 1,000 a month. Maybe we could do that. Or does that mean cutting our expenses in half? Maybe that's not possible. So for me, that values side is, there's 2 sides of the decision. Can I even do it? And once you know that, is it really important to me? I've quantified it now. I also, when I started in this business, I was 100% commission based. And I found that the company I worked for would often want us to give answers that led to selling more product, of course. And so I personally was frustrated, that we didn't have a mathematical way to answer questions like, should I pay off my mortgage? It was, oh, well, over time, this is if you invest the money instead. And and oftentimes when you put the numbers on paper, there in some cases can be an advantage to investing, but it's small. Depending on the interest rate spread, it can be pretty small. And so those are really values based decisions. What feels better to you? If the math isn't showing a big difference, now, if the math does show a big difference, I might say, no, you really should do this instead of that. But if it's minor, let's bring your values into the equation and really discuss what feels better. And I have some clients who understand leverage and wouldn't want to pay off a low interest rate mortgage. And I have others who, even if their mortgage rate was 2.5%, they just, nope, I want to be debt free. And I think those are what I call values based decisions, where we really account for more than just the math.
Absolutely. It makes a lot of sense to me, and I want to thank you for spending all this time with me today. Dana Anspach is the founder and CEO of Sensible Money. If our listeners and our viewers are interested in learning more about you and your business, your practice, your books, where do they find you?
The best place to start would be our company website, which is sensiblemoney.com. And they can also find me on Twitter. My Twitter handle is at moneyover55. I used to write a column called Money Over 55, and that's where that came from.
Fantastic. And if you're looking for more information from us, as always, you can go to our website. It is protectedincome.org. And for more information on this program in particular, protectedincome.org/Anspach. Dana, thank you so much.
Thank you, Jean. It's been a pleasure.
And we'll see you all next time. Bye bye.
Bye.